Behind the glitz, the glamour, and the pageantry of a royal wedding lies a dark, bloody secret. Betrayals, power struggles, violence, and even murder. Join us as we reveal the gruesome truth behind some of Europe's most celebrated royal weddings. We start with one of the most infamous royal weddings in history, that of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. The year was 1509, and the groom, the young King of England, was known for his womanizing. But Catherine was different. She was the daughter of the Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, the famous king and queen who had united Spain under one roof. While it may sound like a match made in heaven, things were not what they seemed. First, Catherine had been promised to Henry's older brother, Prince Arthur, but he died 5 months before the wedding. This didn't deter Henry, though. He set his sights on Catherine and decided that she would make an excellent queen, even though she was initially reluctant. Their wedding took place at the age of 18 and 17 respectively. And while it was a grand affair, there was a palpable tension in the air. The young bride had entered the church on the arm of her uncle, the Marquis of Dorset, and had looked stunning in a gown of cloth of gold, adorned with pearls and precious stones. But when she reached the altar, the groom was nowhere to be seen. In fact, he had sneaked out of the chapel and was busy bedding his new sister-in-law, Mary Tudor. Once he returned, the ceremony went ahead, and the couple was soon man and wife. However, their relationship was far from blissful. Henry was obsessed with having a male heir, and when Catherine failed to produce one, he began looking for another bride. He fell in love with Anne Boleyn, a lady in waiting to Catherine, and soon had her move to a separate residence where he could see her in secret. After 6 years of marriage and one child, a daughter named Mary, Henry and Catherine were finally divorced. The annulment papers stated that the marriage was illegal because Catherine had previously been promised to Henry's brother. Catherine refused to accept the divorce, believing that her marriage was sacred and that only God could dissolve it. She remained steadfast in her beliefs until her death in 1536. Henry married Anne, and their son, born 2 years later, became King Edward VI. Next up is the wedding of Elizabeth of York and Henry Tudor, which took place on January 18, 1486. It was a marriage of convenience between two houses that had been at war for years. Elizabeth's father, King Edward IV, had died suddenly, leaving the throne to her 12-year-old brother, Edward V. But Henry Tudor, also known as Henry VII, had other plans. He invaded England with a small army and defeated the young king at the Battle of Bosworth Field. With Edward V dead, Henry Tudor became the first Tudor king of England. Now, you might be wondering why Elizabeth of York agreed to marry the man who had just opposed her family and ended their reign. Well, it's all about strategy. By marrying Henry Tudor, she united the two warring factions and legitimized his claim to the throne. Plus, she got to keep her noble title and status. But let's not forget the baggage that came with this union. Elizabeth was a member of the Plantagenet dynasty, a direct descendant of Edward III, while Henry was a distant cousin, twice removed. Talk about a tangled web of family ties. The wedding was a lavish affair held at Westminster Abbey. Elizabeth looked radiant in a gown of red velvet, while Henry was resplendent in robes of gold and crimson. The ceremony was a symbol of unity, but it also marked the end of an era. Elizabeth and Henry had 8 children together, including 2 sets of twins, and ruled over England for 24 years. Now, let's travel across the Channel to France and explore the wedding of Henry II and Catherine de' Medici. It was May 1559, and the 41-year-old king was desperate for an heir. He had been married twice before, but both of his wives had failed to produce a legitimate child. Enter Catherine de' Medici, a 17-year-old Italian noblewoman who was chosen as Henry's third wife because she was young, beautiful, and most importantly, of childbearing age. The wedding took place in the Cathedral of Our Lady in Paris, and it was a star-studded event. Catherine's mother, the powerful Queen Mother Isabella of Spain, was in attendance, along with many members of the French nobility. The bride wore a stunning gown of white satin and lace, and she was escorted down the aisle by 4 ladies-in-waiting. But the festivities were cut short when Henry's mistress, Diane de Poitiers, arrived at the cathedral wearing a dress in the same color scheme. Talk about a fashion faux pas. Catherine and Diane despised each other, and their rivalry would become a major scandal at the French court. Henry, too, would have more mistresses, but none of them bore him a legitimate child. After 34 years of marriage, Henry's will went through several revisions, and it was rumored that Catherine had bribed one of the king's counselors to ensure that she would inherit his vast fortune. Upon his death in 1559, Henry left everything to Diane and his illegitimate children, leaving Catherine penniless. To add insult to injury, Diane's portrait was painted on the walls of the Palace of Fontainebleau, while Catherine's was banished to the attics. The power struggles and rivalries of the French court may seem like a thing of the past, but they continue to fascinate and intrigue us today. Meanwhile, back in England, the year is 1620, and the groom is King Charles I, a sickly young monarch who is never married. His counselors are desperate to find him a bride, and they set their sights on a 16-year-old Spanish princess named Maria Anna of Austria. The wedding was arranged to cement an alliance between England and Spain and was celebrated with great fanfare. Charles and Maria were said to have exchanged vows in secret a week before the actual ceremony so that they could consummate the marriage before the bride's arrival. However, upon seeing the groom, Maria Anna refused to cooperate. It turned out that she had heard rumors about Charles's frail health and bizarre behavior, and she was not willing to take the risk. No amount of persuasion or threats could change her mind, and she remained a virgin for the rest of her life. Talk about a royal headache. Throughout their 13-year marriage, Charles had affairs with other women, but he never married again. Maria Anna, meanwhile, became known as the two-faced queen, always appearing in public with a mask on to hide her disfigurement. The unhappy couple had no children, and Charles's younger brother, Prince Rupert, succeeded him upon his death in 1625. Our next royal wedding takes us to Sweden in the year 1823. The groom is King Oscar I, and the bride is Princess Josephine of Leiningen. At first glance, it seems like your typical fairy tale wedding. But there's a twist. King Oscar had been married before, and his first wife was the sister of his new bride. That's right. This royal wedding was a case of double jeopardy. You see, the king's first wife, Queen Desideria, had died under mysterious circumstances, and there were rumors that she had been poisoned by her own sister. So when Josephine came along, it seemed like a good idea to marry the groom and the bridesmaid. But there was more to the story. Desideria's death had been investigated, and a servant girl had been convicted of poisoning her. But the king never stopped believing that Josephine was behind it all. In fact, he became so convinced of her guilt that he had her arrested and sent to a remote castle as a prisoner. There she spent the last 31 years of her life without ever setting foot outside again. As for Josephine, well, she never married and died, believing that her reputation had been unjustly tarnished. And that's a wrap on our tour of the bloodiest royal weddings in European history. From poisoned sisters to vengeful widows, these unions were anything but picture perfect. Which wedding was the most shocking to you? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to stay tuned for more historical tales.